welcome to Oceanic Oracle. My name is Ari and today I'm going to be going through my almost favourites of 2021. I sort of felt like doing this sort of thing because I know I've released a favourites video, or I will have released a favourites video by the time this goes up, and I thought I would actually share some books that were almost my favourites. There might have been something about them that just didn't give them that like full 5-star rating, and I thought I would share some of that with you all. I have 12 books. I try to get one from each month, but some months were better than others. It just depends on when I read these books. Some books I have here, others I don't, so I'm going to be sticking up a picture of their cover. I just thought this would be interesting. It gives me an opportunity to talk critically about books that I like but like aren't 100% new favourites, if that makes sense. I went through my core pile, which is my spreadsheet that I use to track all of my information, all of my data regarding books, like authors, LGBTQ plus representation, anything like that. I use my spreadsheet to track that because then I end up with graphs, and I love seeing data and graphs. I just find it a lot easier than just crunching numbers. It gives me a chance to see what I've been reading over the year, and I just like it. I love stats and I like Excels. So I went through all of that and I picked out these 12 books. Now that all that sort of explaining's out of the way, I guess we should head right in and begin. Let's take a journey all the way back to January of this year. This was one of the first books that I read, and this was Cersei by Madeline Miller. Now, I loved The Song of Achilles. One of my sisters got it for me for Christmas. I picked it up and I devoured it. Cersei is based on the Odyssey, just a small section in here, but that's sort of where the major plot line goes, and Madeline Miller takes this small section and expands. She adds in other areas of Cersei's mythos. So if you don't know, Cersei is like the goddess of witches, or she's the first proper witch with her abilities. She's the daughter of Helios, who is the god who drives the sun chariot. I mean, before the Romans sort of gave that ability to Apollo. So I gave this book 4 stars at the beginning of the year. It wasn't a 5-star read. There was some aspects in here that I didn't agree with. The writing was good. It was just the actual characters and their behaviour that I didn't like. But you get that with Greek mythology. Like, the way Odysseus was portrayed was a bit different from my interpretation of Odysseus. But again, it's like to each their own. Everyone has their own opinion on how certain Greek heroes behave, like tragic heroes. But it was a nice book. It's very like girl power, like women supporting women, and I actually really enjoyed that aspect. There was just some issues with characterization. It was an almost favourite. I read it, I enjoyed it, I gave it 4 stars. The next book that's on this list is 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. Natalie Haynes is a classic scholar. I first heard about her on the BBC because she has this Stand Up for the Classics programme. I listened to that with my mum. And last year for Christmas, again, one of my sisters got me Pandora's Jar, which is Natalie Haynes' like non-fiction book about women in Greek mythology. I really love this book, so when I was looking online, I saw that Natalie Haynes had also written a book called 1,000 Ships, and I decided to pick that up. So 1,000 Ships is Natalie Haynes' take on like the women in the Iliad. It's her take on all the way the different women within the society impacted each other. Each chapter is told but from the perspective of a different woman in Greek mythology. I found it fascinating. I didn't enjoy it as much as I liked The Song of Achilles, but I think this book is fantastic if you're looking for like a look into the way that ancient Greek women were treated. This book has godly points of views, it has normal women's points of views. It's just written really well. I'm a fan of Natalie Haynes' writing. Like, this book is one of my favorite non-fiction books for Greek literature. I really enjoy reading about women in Greek mythology because most of the time all the talk is given to the men because the women weren't allowed to help unless they were a goddess or something. I really enjoyed it. there was just something about it that I didn't like. I think it was some of the jumps that happened. Like, I think there was some jumps in time that I wasn't expecting, so I didn't love it as much as I thought I was going to, but it's still a really good book. And if you're into Greek mythology and you're looking for new retellings, like, or a feminist take on things from a classic scholar, you should definitely pick it up. The next book that I have on this list is another Greek mythology inspired thing. Wow, I'm just really on a roll with my Greek myth inspiration. And this book is Ariadne. This is one of my prettiest books that I actually own. I love this cover. I have the Waterstones edition, the Jennifer Saint's signature. This was one of my most anticipated reads of like the year. I really liked the first 25% of this book. I loved her writing. I love Jennifer Saint's writing. I really enjoyed her take on the Ariadne Theseus like labyrinth myth, as well as like where it was going. The issue I had with this, and the reason that it's on this list and not my favorites, is that 25% in you get introduced to like a second point of view. It's not in the blurb, it's not in here, and I was really like jarred. It took me out of it. It took me out of the story, which sucked because I thought this was going to be 5 stars. In the end, this was 4 stars. It would have been 5 stars if I'd have known from the beginning it was going to be dual perspective. But I do like Jennifer Saint's writing, and I loved her take on Ariadne and Dionysus, as well as Theseus and Theodora. I like the take, and I like the fact that Jennifer Saint was not only telling Ariadne's story, but also telling another women in Greek myths story as well. It's not just based on one straight myth, it's a combination of myths set around this time and with these characters. So I do like this. Jennifer Saint is releasing a new book next year called Electra, and I am looking forward to picking that up. Hopefully I'll be able to grab a copy when it comes out. I think I like the sound of Electra a lot more. I did read the Electra play this year as well, so I do know the source material. Well, I have an idea what it's about, and I know going into it that it's definitely going to have at least 3 points of views right from the beginning, which I think good on Jennifer Saint for putting them out there straight away, because I think I'm going to enjoy the book a lot more knowing that there are multiple people's point of view from the beginning. It just won't jar me. I would have rated this higher if I'd have known, so there's that. The next book that I have on this list is a book by Dee Francis, and it's called Hot Money. I found this book really fascinating. This book focuses on the main character Ian. Ian is called in by his estranged father to investigate some murders that have happened in their family. It turns into a real high stakes battle because Ian's father, Malcolm, has 5 ex-wives and 9 children in total. They're always fighting over who gets what inheritance and vying for other people's attention and all that sort of thing. It's a big family mess, and this story is really high stakes. I really loved this thriller. There was just something about it that didn't like 100% click, if that makes sense. I think the story was brilliant. I did not see the twists and turns coming. It was just something about it that sort of separated it from the rest of the books. I am quite picky about my thrillers, but this one was a very good one. Dee Francis writes thrillers about horses most of the time. There's always some aspect of horses in his books. Dee Francis writes his characters so well. He really does like deep dives into the aspects behind these characters, and I think it really gives them like life and gives them something in the background. And it's great. I think if you love thrillers and you're looking for something else to try, I would recommend Dee Francis. I would recommend his books because I think he's a great author. This book just wasn't my favourite, so it's made this list. The next book I have on my list is The Princess Trap by Talia Hibbert. I have all 3 of the Brown sister novels in the trilogy, and I read those earlier this year, and I felt like, you know what, I'm just going to go out there and look at other things in Talia Hibbert's like repertoire to have a look at and to read, because I like her writing, or at least I like her writing in those books. So I went and I picked up The Princess Trap. Now, The Princess Trap came out in 2018, so 1 year before Chloe Brown, and I could tell the differences just reading it. I love the story, I love this concept. This book really let me see the difference in writing and the progression that Talia Hibbert took. I was able to see the progression her writing took comparing The Princess Trap to Get a Life Chloe Brown. Particularly Get a Life Chloe Brown came out 1 year afterwards, and it was just really good to see the difference in writing because I really like Talia Hibbert's writing in this trilogy. The main reason it's on this list is Talia Hibbert's writing wasn't as good in this one, but this is an earlier novel, so I give her the benefit of the doubt. I still really enjoyed it. I love the story, I love the characters, I love the concept. It was great. It was just the writing that like pushed it to a 4 as opposed to a 5-star for me, but still a great book. And if you like romance, you should definitely check out Talia Hibbert. She's a great romance writer. The next book I have on this list is another thriller, that's a surprise, and it is The Girls Ive Been by Tess Sharp. So I love the story, I love the concept, and I did enjoy the fact that you can see there are grey pages. The grey pages take place in the past. I like the dual timeline aspect. This book is very good, and I think it's great for anyone who wants to read young adult thrillers. I lean more towards adult thrillers, I think, than young adult, because that's just the kind of reader I am and at the stage I am in my life and in my reading journey. But I think if you're looking to get into thrillers, The Girls Ive Been is a good one to start off with. This is about Nora, who is an ex-con artist. She turns up to the bank with her girlfriend and she bumps into her ex-boyfriend, and they all go to deposit some money into the bank. And then a bank robbery starts to take place while they're in the bank, so quite stressful. And it's all about Nora trying to get them out of that situation and trying to save all of their lives from these armed robbers. It's a really good book, a really good thriller, high stakes. I think it's great if you're looking for something to get you into thrillers. Almost a favourite, not my favourite, because I want something a bit more hard-hitting, but still a very good book. It's a good book. What can I say? The next book I have on here is another YA book, more of a dark fantasy than your usual YA book, and that is To Kill a Kingdom. This is a Little Mermaid retelling. The reason it's on this list and not on my favourites is just because I had other fantasy books that I enjoyed more than this one. There were certain aspects in here though I was just like, really? But that's the thing with fiction, right? Like, it's all personal taste. There are things in here that I loved, and that's why it's on my almost favourites. But there's definitely some aspects, I think some areas of the writing wasn't strong enough, some of the character development was a bit let off, but personal preference, and I've also had time to reflect on it. I enjoyed the plot, I was intrigued, but the thing is some of the logic behind the characters and the choices that they made was a bit like, I still really enjoyed the story, and there's a reason it's on this almost favourites list. Like, if you want to read a Little Mermaid retelling, which is sort of a bit darker, go and pick this up. It's really good. The next one on here is She Who Became the Sun. And this is by Shelley Parker Chan. Again, this was one of my most anticipated releases of this year. This is a Mulan retelling. It's sort of a more historical based retelling of Mulan as opposed to like the mythical side. So the way this was described to me before it came out was the Song of Achilles version for Mulan. So I was excited because I love the Song of Achilles. So I was expecting something else that I didn't get. I was expecting much more romance in this book, but this book actually is far more like a historical fiction novel, less so a romantic novel. There is a bit of romance in here, but it's not very like heavy. If you don't like romance in your books, I don't think this will offend you. This is very much a war book, and I'm okay reading books about war. I mean, most of my fantasy books usually end in a war. The series usually ends in war, so I'm used to it. So this one's very like historically based on war. I love this book. I love the stuff about Chinese history. I enjoyed this book. Like, it wasn't what I expected because I was expecting more of something that it wasn't. So there's a reason it's on here. Still a wonderful story, and if you like historical fiction, if you're okay reading war novels, I think you'd enjoy this one. The next book I have on here is Thorne. I really enjoyed this book when I picked it up, and I've had some time to think about this, so I picked this up in November. This is a retelling of The Goose Girl, which is a story by the Brothers Grimm, which I hadn't heard about before, like not at least until I like picked this book up and I heard people talking about it. And I really enjoyed this. Some of the logic that goes on in books is supposed to be unrealistic. Like, I get that. Like, not all, like, book characters aren't supposed to make sense 100% of the time. Otherwise, it would be a very boring book, because the book character would just go from A to B to C and not make mistakes. Some things I was a bit skeptical about, so I gave this one an 8 for logic. I really enjoyed the characters, and I like the fact that this book this book isn't really romance heavy. It's more like learning to like accept yourself, the stuff in you, before you go and like meet a guy or whoever you find, like whoever your partner will be. I really love this book, but I didn't love it as much as some of my other YA fantasy books, so that's why it's in this video instead of my favourites. Still a beautiful book, and you should definitely check it out if you're looking for a Goose Girl or a Brothers Grimm like retelling. More people should definitely go pick it up. Next one I have on here is another D. Francis, and it is Second Wind. I just read this in November. This book follows a meteorologist. He's a television presenter. He tells the weather, and it's about him traveling with his friend from the meteorology department. His friend is a pilot, so they go flying together. His friend actually volunteers to take him flying through a hurricane, which he is fascinated about and wants to go and try, but things don't go the way that they had planned. I will warn you, there is like, the character gets shipwrecked, so if you don't want to read about that sort of thing, you just keep that in mind. I didn't love it as much as I loved other thrillers. It felt like a 4-star as opposed to a 5-star. Like, there was just something about it that wasn't as that wasn't as fulfilling as other ones, and it might have been the fact that it took a while for the mystery to actually happen, so it was quite slow, so the pacing was a bit off. There is that. The next book I have on here is Song of the Forever Rains. This is the first book in a fantasy romance trilogy. I did not like this book as much as I liked the second book. I recently read the second book in November, and I absolutely loved it. I gave that 5 stars. This one I gave 4 stars. I think the main issue I had was with the main male protagonist, because it was told in dual perspective. The main male protagonist was a bit like, I don't know, it was just something about him that wasn't completely like, it just didn't sit right with me completely. He got better, obviously, like as the character developed, I think he got better, but I definitely prefer the male protagonist in the second book. Personal choice. I think the whole thing, the atmosphere was very dreary and cold as well, so that might have impacted my outlook on the things. I like the second book better. That's why this one's on here, because without this book I wouldn't have read the second one, so there we go. And finally, the last book I have on here is Dance with a Fae Prince. The reason this is on here as an almost favourite is that, like, even though I gave this 5 stars, definitely wasn't my favourite fantasy romance of the year. I just really love the Eros and Psyche retelling. This took it further, which is great, and I loved it. But I think, I don't know, it was just something about it. I loved the fact that it was different, and I really like Elise Cover's writing. It was a bit different, and I liked the take on it, and I liked the like differences between things. I don't know how to explain it, because like, it's almost a favourite. Just didn't reach the mark. That's it. That's the last book. What I want to say before I go is I hope you liked this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe if you want more bookish content. I hope you're enjoying Countdown to Bookmas. I'm not sure which day this will be up, but I'm sure I'll figure it out eventually. I hope you have a wonderful day or night, depending on when you're watching this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.